On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
Jimmy Buffett, the beloved singer-songwriter and cultural icon, passed away on September 1, 2023, at the age of 76. His death came after a private battle with a rare skin cancer, Merkel cell carcinoma, which he had fought for years. For millions of fans, it was a bittersweet end to a life built around joy, escapism, and the idea that paradise could be found in music, storytelling, and community. Buffett's passing was natural, yet it carried the weight of irony. The man who preached living like it's always 5 o'clock somewhere was, in reality, quietly waging a mortal fight. His death reflected both the values of his era and the cultural movement he helped create. Beginning in the 1970s, Buffett crafted a musical and lifestyle brand around carefree island living, rum-soaked relaxation, and freedom from the grind of modern life. In an age marked by political tension, economic shifts, and social unrest, his music offered an antidote, an escape into sunshine, sand, and saltwater dreams. His passing, therefore, was not just the loss of an entertainer, but of a spirit who had defined an entire ethos for generations, seeking release from everyday pressures. The immediate consequences of his death were waves of tributes from fans, celebrities, and fellow musicians. Parrotheads, his loyal following, gathered in bars and on beaches, turning grief into celebrations of life, just as Buffett himself might have wanted. His empire, stretching from restaurants to resorts, from best-selling books to Broadway, suddenly felt like a memorial to the man who had turned leisure into a cultural phenomenon. Buffett's death amplified his legend. While he had long been adored by his fan base, his passing crystallized his role as more than a musician. He became a symbol of optimism, of carving out a world that values joy as much as ambition. His songs like Margaritaville and Come Monday became not just hits but cultural touchstones, and after his death, they carried even deeper resonance, songs that felt like farewells from the man who sang them. What Jimmy Buffett's passing reveals is humanity's yearning for memory that soothes rather than scars. We immortalize him not only in records and concert footage, but in the rituals of escape he inspired. Beach gatherings, tropical drinks, the simple act of slowing down. His legacy proves that sometimes the most powerful cultural memory is not tied to power or tragedy, but to happiness, freely shared. Tommy Morrison, once hailed as one of boxing's brightest heavyweights, died on September 1, 2013, at the age of 44. His death came after a long and tragic decline, officially attributed to multiple organ failure. For a man once defined by raw power, charisma, and movie star looks, his final years were marked by illness, controversy, and isolation. Morrison's story was not just about boxing, it was about fame, excess, and the fragility of human ambition. Morrison's death reflected the turbulence of the era he lived in. In the early 1990s, he rose quickly through the heavyweight ranks, winning the WBO title and even stepping into Hollywood with a major role in Rocky V. He represented both the glamour and the danger of the decade's sports culture, where talent often collided with the temptations of wealth and celebrity. In 1996, his career came to a sudden halt when he tested positive for HIV, a diagnosis that not only shocked the sports world but also underscored the fear and stigma surrounding the disease at the time. His fall from glory mirrored society's struggle to understand and confront the realities of HIV/AIDS. The immediate aftermath of his passing brought a mix of sorrow and reflection. For boxing fans, it was the end of a story filled with both triumph and heartbreak. Tributes acknowledged his explosive talent in the ring, his thunderous left hook, his grit, his flair, but also mourned the unfulfilled promise of a man who might have been a lasting champion had fate and his own choices not intervened. His death reminded the public that behind every fighter's swagger lies a deeply human vulnerability. Morrison's death amplified his legend, but in a tragic register. He became a cautionary tale, often mentioned alongside great what-if stories in sports history. Yet his struggles also made him a symbol of resilience, for even in decline, he continued to fight, sometimes against reality itself. His legacy lives on in highlight reels, in the mythology of heavyweight boxing, and in the continuing dialogue about athletes, health, and the price of fame. What Morrison's story reveals about humanity is the uneasy balance between power and fragility. We celebrate champions for their strength, yet we immortalize them for their struggles. Through documentaries, biographical accounts, and the enduring memory of that left hook, Morrison remains alive in the cultural imagination. His life and death remind us that mortality comes for even the strongest, but memory, shaped by triumph and tragedy alike, ensures they are never truly forgotten. John Polito, one of Hollywood's most recognizable character actors, passed away on September 1, 2016 at the age of 65. He died from complications of multiple myeloma, a form of cancer, after years of health struggles. His death was natural, yet it carried the weight of loss for film and television, a reminder that sometimes the faces we don't always know by name leave the deepest impressions. Polito's passing reflected the challenges of his era in Hollywood. While leading men often basked in the spotlight, character actors like him built the foundation of cinema's most memorable stories. With his gravelly voice, sharp features, and commanding presence, Polito became a fixture in the films of the Coen brothers, appearing in classics like Miller's Crossing, The Big Lebowski, and Barton Fink. His career was proof that art thrives not only on stars, but on the men and women who give stories texture and truth. His death reminded audiences that while fame may be selective, legacy is earned through authenticity. The immediate consequences of his passing rippled through Hollywood. Fellow actors and directors paid tribute to his generosity, professionalism, and versatility. Fans of the Coens revisited his performances, marveling at how he could steal scenes with a glance, a sneer, or a single line. For many, his death reawakened appreciation for the often overlooked artistry of character actors, whose contributions are vital yet rarely celebrated until after they are gone. Polito's death amplified his legend in a quiet but lasting way. In life, he may not have been a household name, but in death, he was remembered as a cornerstone of modern American cinema. His work continues to resonate not because he sought stardom, but because he embodied his roles with honesty. Every rewatch of The Big Lebowski or Miller's Crossing keeps his memory alive, ensuring that his presence never fades from the cultural landscape. What Polito's story reveals is humanity's complex relationship with mortality and recognition. Death often reminds us to honor the unsung, the steady hands behind great works. We immortalize figures like him through film archives, retrospectives, and the simple act of rewatching, allowing performance to outlast the performer. Through John Polito, we see that while mortality claims the man, the art remains eternal, etched forever in the flicker of film. Shelley Berman, the groundbreaking comedian, actor, and writer, passed away on September 1, 2017, at the age of 92. His death from complications of Alzheimer's disease was natural, yet it carried symbolic weight. For a man whose genius lay in language, timing, and wit, to fade into silence through a disease that robs memory felt especially poignant. His passing closed the chapter on a pioneer who reshaped the very art of stand-up comedy. Berman's career reflected the changing values of mid-20th century America. Rising in the 1950s and 60s, he was among the first comedians to turn stand-up into a form of social commentary. His style, introspective monologues performed while sitting on a stool, often focused on everyday frustrations, was revolutionary in an era dominated by fast one-liners and slapstick. He opened the door for a generation of comics who saw stand-up not just as entertainment, but as art. His death, then, was not only the loss of a performer, but of a craftsman who had elevated comedy's cultural standing. The immediate aftermath of his passing brought tributes from across the entertainment world. Younger comedians credited him as a forerunner, a man who made space for honesty and vulnerability in humor. Fans revisited his Grammy-winning comedy albums, rediscovering the brilliance that once sold out nightclubs and landed him on the cover of Time magazine. For many, his death served as a reminder that comedy, when wielded with intelligence, has the power to shape cultural conversation. Berman's death amplified his legend in subtle but lasting ways. Though his career had highs and lows, at times overshadowed by controversy or by the rise of new comedic voices, his influence never disappeared. His later work as an actor, most notably as Larry David's father on Curb Your Enthusiasm, introduced him to a new generation, ensuring that his wit would not be confined to the past. What Berman's story reveals about humanity is the delicate interplay between voice, memory, and mortality. We remember him through vinyl records, televised performances, and the ripple effect of his influence on comedy's greats. His art ensures that even as memory fades in life, legacy remains sharp in culture. Through Shelley Berman, we see how humor itself can be immortal, outliving the body, transcending time, and reminding us that laughter is one of the most enduring ways humanity confronts mortality. Olga Deas, the gifted Dutch ballerina whose talent once promised a dazzling future, died tragically young on September 1, 1978, at only 33 years old. Her death, caused by complications from alcoholism, was both natural and devastatingly preventable. For a dancer celebrated as one of the brightest stars of the Dutch National Ballet, her passing underscored the physical and emotional toll of artistic perfection and the silent struggles that can exist behind beauty and grace. Deas had risen swiftly in the ballet world during the 1960s and 70s. Known for her lyrical quality, expressive face, and ethereal presence, she was often compared to ballet greats like Galina Ulanova. Yet her era demanded relentless discipline and near-impossible physical standards. In that context, her death reflected not only personal demons, but the pressures of a profession where fragility was hidden beneath the facade of elegance. Her struggles mirrored a wider issue. The performing arts often celebrated brilliance while ignoring the human cost behind it. The immediate impact of her death was profound within the ballet community. She had been a cultural icon in the Netherlands, admired not just for her artistry, but for the promise of what more she could achieve. Colleagues and fans mourned not only the loss of a star, but of an unfinished story, a career cut short at its peak. Her passing brought attention, though quietly, to the darker side of ballet. The immense pressure on dancers to maintain image, endurance, and control in a world that demands perfection. Did her death amplify her legend? In many ways, yes. Like many artists who die young, Deas became immortalized in memory as a symbol of brilliance and fragility intertwined. Film recordings and photographs preserve her delicate artistry, and her name continues to surface in discussions of ballet's most promising talents lost too soon. Her legacy is felt not only in admiration, but in the recognition of the personal cost behind great performance. What Olga Deas's death reveals about humanity is the tension between beauty and vulnerability. We seek to immortalize those who dazzle us, even when their private pain goes unseen. She is remembered through archival footage, tributes, and the continued reverence of ballet lovers who see in her story both inspiration and warning. Through Olga Deas, we are reminded that mortality does not diminish art, it heightens it. And in her dances, captured forever, she continues to move across the stage, timeless, untouchable, eternal. Nolla Nelson, the powerhouse actress and singer whose career stretched across stage, screen, and music, passed away on September 1, 2017, at the age of 77. Her death, from cancer, was natural, but no less poignant. For a woman whose commanding voice and presence broke barriers for Black performers in American theater and film, her passing marked the loss of a trailblazer who carried herself with quiet strength and undeniable authority. Born in Brooklyn, Nelson rose to prominence in the 1960s and 70s, a time when opportunities for Black women in the performing arts were limited and often typecast. Yet she refused to be confined. On Broadway, she won acclaim for her magnetic performances, and her one-woman shows showcased her talent as both a singer and storyteller. In film and television, she left her mark in projects like Antwone Fisher and The Cotton Club. Her death reflected the natural cycle of a life lived fully, but it also reminded audiences of how each generation of performers built stepping stones for the next, often without receiving the same recognition they enabled others to achieve. The immediate consequence of Nelson's passing was felt most deeply in the theater community. Fellow actors and directors remembered her as a mentor, someone who embodied discipline and artistry without compromise. Though her name may not have been as widely known as some contemporaries, her influence ran deep. She opened doors, and her legacy lived on in the rising generation of performers who followed in her path. Did her death amplify her legend? In a way, yes. As often happens with unsung pioneers, her passing invited retrospection. It encouraged audiences and historians to revisit her body of work, to acknowledge her impact, and to celebrate the breadth of her artistry. Nelson became not only remembered for her roles, but also for her courage in an era when visibility itself was an act of defiance. Her story reveals humanity's constant yearning to honor those who shape culture from the margins. We immortalize figures like Nelson through tributes, recordings, and the memories of those she touched directly. In doing so, we remind ourselves that power and influence are not only found in headlines, but also in the steady presence of those who make the stage a place of truth and transformation.